Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this last workshop in the hub on Horizon Europe implementation today. It might have been a long day. Perhaps some of our energy levels a little bit low, but I hope you'll agree we have an exciting and stimulating 60 minutes ahead of us. My name is Alan Cross, and I'm the Deputy Head of Unit in the Common Implementation Centre in the European Commission. And this afternoon in this session, we're going to tackle the topic of proposal evaluation, which I hope you'll agree is a decisive phase in any research funding programme. It finally determines how and where public investments are spent. Is it going to the best ideas, and is it going to the best people? In fact, achieving the political goals of our programme, be it climate change, digitisation, whatever it might be, achieving the impact of the programme actually comes down to thousands and thousands of individual decisions on whether or not to fund projects. And these decisions are made on the basis of the work of peer reviews, of evaluation experts, arguing the pros and cons of particular proposals. And if you look at our current programme, Horizon 2020, right now to date, we've received just about 250,000 proposals have been successfully submitted, and each of these has been examined carefully by evaluation experts. So that's 250,000 difficult discussions, head-to-head, pros and cons of different proposals, all leading up to the decision on whether or not to award a grant to a particular project. So now, of course, we're looking to Horizon Europe, the new programme. This is our collective challenge now, is to design the best evaluation system we can that's fit for the ambitious objectives of the new programme over the next 7 years. So how are we doing that? Well, firstly, we're building on a lot of experience over many years, not just the current programme, but previous programmes, and looking at the lessons we've learned over those years. And secondly, we've had a widespread consultation of stakeholders, of different types of stakeholders, including applicants, beneficiaries, public bodies, industry, and that in particular was part of the preparation of the Horizon Europe implementation strategy. So where we are now, I think there are three messages. First of all, the new evaluation system, as with much of Horizon Europe, will have a strong measure of continuity, which is itself a simplification. For example, we'll keep the three main evaluation criteria of excellence, impact, and implementation. We're going to be making improvements wherever we can, wherever possible. And very importantly, and we'll come to this, we're going to adapt our system to the particular features which are inherent to the new programme. So here we are at September 2020. Our preparations are obviously well advanced, but right now we're still looking for feedback, helping us to develop and fine-tune and make sure we've got it right so we can hit the ground running when the new programme is launched with the first calls. And of course, we want to be flexible to be able to improve and further fine-tune as the programme is rolled out. So the title of this workshop, I hope you'll agree, says it all. It's all about finding the highest quality system we can, making sure we've got the best experts, the best smart processes. We want to be transparent, so experts and applicants alike know the rules of the game. And we want to be fair, so it should be completely equal opportunities, making no difference who you are or where you're coming from. Now, today's workshop is not about big policy, I would say. It's not about the philosophy. We're trying to be practical and operational, really trying to discuss and look at what works, including hearing perhaps of what goes on in some national programmes across Europe and even across the world. We're going to focus on two big blocks in our 60 minutes, so it's not long. And we could have whole conferences on this, but we're going to focus first of all on, actually, we're going to jump straight away to what's new in the new programme. There are some particular features which have required us to adjust our processes, and we're going to hear about those first. And in the second part of our session, we're going to look at the whole question of the experts, the human side of things. How do we recruit those best experts from different disciplines? How do they work together? The format in each block will have a person either from the Commission or the executive agency, and we'll introduce them in a minute. We'll introduce that topic, and then we've invited special respondents who will go from outside different organisations to give a first response, their reaction to that particular subject. But then importantly, we want to open up to questions and answers. We want to hear from you. We want to hear, does it make sense? Do you have other ideas? Do you have questions? Or just making a comment? And there, of course, we've got the question and answer chat box where we'd like you to make your remarks as we go forward. Please remember the two blocks. First of all, we're going to be looking at the innovations, what's new in the new program. And then the second block, we're going to be looking at the whole question of the experts themselves. We're going to try, if the technical side works, we're going to try and ask one or two polling questions, online polling during the session. So look out for this. And finally, I'm delighted to say that we're going to be joined by the Director General of DG Research and Innovation, Jean-Eric Paquet, who will join us towards the end of our session, and hopefully he'll be able to say a few words before we close. So I hope that's clear. And without any further ado, then I'm going to hand over to Isabel Vergara, who is a Senior Policy Officer in the European Commission, who's going to introduce the topic of the new features of Horizon Europe and what we're going to be trying in the new program. So Isabel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yes, I would like to talk to mention to you the main innovations that we want to include in the evaluation system in Horizon Europe. The main message that you have already mentioned, Alan, is that there will be continuation. So the evaluation system in Horizon Europe will be based on the evaluation system that we have today in Horizon 2020. However, we need to adapt the system to new features, as you already mentioned, for instance, the portfolio approach. But we also want to address some aspects of the system in order to make it even more robust and more transparent as we have it today. So today, I would like to mention three main innovations. The first one is our intention to test anonymous evaluations. So this we will test it in one or two first calls of Horizon Europe, and then once we analyze the result of this test, we will take decisions on whether to roll out these anonymous evaluations for all the program or not. So in these anonymous evaluations, we will ask our experts to evaluate an outline of the proposal without knowing who is behind this proposal. So the experts will not know the identity of the applicants. With this, we want to address concerns about a possible unconscious partiality that our evaluation experts may have in favor of proposals from well-known organizations or participants coming from countries with better performing R&I systems. Or also other type of possible bias like gender. At this point, I could make clear that we have absolutely no evidence that the current proposal evaluation system is systematically biased in this sense. But we understand that there might be concerns on this, and we want to do something to tackle those concerns. So, as I said, we will test this anonymous evaluation in the first stage of two stages calls. In those calls, we will include a new additional eligibility criteria, and we will ask the participants not to disclose the identity of the partners in the narrative part of the proposal. If they do so, intentionally or unintentionally, the proposal might be rejected. So there are serious legal consequences in this approach, in the anonymous evaluation. We will assess this pilot by asking experts and applicants and by comparing other evaluation not anonymized that we have previously done in the same area. And we will have the objective to identify whether the procedure creates any legal or operational difficulties, and if so, whether we can overcome those difficulties without jeopardizing the smoothly running of the evaluation process. The second innovation that we want to include in the evaluation process is the right to react or rebuttal process. We will also test this in one or two calls of the first work program of Horizon Europe. And in this process, the applicants will be actively involved in the evaluation process. They will be able to react in the middle of the evaluation process to the individual experts' comments. Then the experts at the time they take the final decision, the final assessment of the proposal, will take into account not only their own individual assessment, but also the reaction of the applicants. With this test, with this new approach, we want to address concerns on the quality of the feedback to applicants, but we also believe that this new approach has the potential to make the system even more transparent as it is today. This will not be the only action that we will do in order to improve the quality of the feedback to applicants. We also want to organize more systematic trainings for experts, more focused. We also have developed minimum standards for drafting evaluation summary reports. And in general, we want to increase the participation of the applicants in the evaluation process. Naturally, this is done by adding a phase, an interview phase in the evaluation process. We already do this in several parts of Horizon 2020, like in the European Innovation Council or European Research Council. But these interviews are not feasible in calls where we receive thousands of proposals, a numerous number of proposals. So, and this is the reason we want to implement this right to react or rebuttal process first in a test environment, and then we will take some conclusions and a possible rollout for other evaluations. Finally, I would like to mention that we will also have to adapt our evaluation process to new features in Horizon Europe, like the portfolio approach. The portfolio approach intends to fund in a given call a number of proposals that all together aim to reach the same goal at the same time. So they will also have altogether an impact that a single proposal cannot reach. And for this, we also need to fine-tune our evaluation process, and we are discussing several changes in the evaluation process. One possible modification will be that the evaluation process in portfolio approach will be carried out in 2 steps. First step, the evaluation of the intrinsic evaluation of the proposal, evaluating the quality of one proposal alone. And then in a second step, to take into consideration the criteria that we need to build the portfolio approach. Of course, all those criteria will be transparently published in the call conditions in the work program. And Alan, these are the 3 main changes that I want to mention. I would be glad to hear the comments from our experts and audience. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Isabel. And I see in the chat column is already quite a bit of interest, in particular on the blind evaluation. So we'll come to those questions. But first of all, I'd like to invite our respondent, Mathilde Rummel, who is a senior policy officer at Science Europe, who's been following some of these questions, I know, for quite some time. So Mathilde, would you like to take the floor and just have your first reactions to what you've heard from Isabel? Mathilde.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan, and thank you, Isabel, for your presentation and for inviting me to be the first respondent before the debate is open. Maybe before addressing the 3 proposals that you just made, Isabel, maybe one global comment. At Science Europe, we really believe that research assessment processes are very important quality assurance tools to ensure that the best research and innovation is funded. And therefore, we believe that all research organizations should conduct on a regular basis evaluations of the robustness of their assessment processes, not only to remove bias or unconscious bias, unfair treatment, etc., but also to ensure that these processes cope with the requirements of a research system that, as we know, continually evolves. So Science Europe will certainly support the effort of the Commission to try to improve its processes and adapt constantly. And now I'm going to try to give answers to the 3 novelties that you mentioned. First, the anonymous evaluation. This pilot, as you said, mainly aims to identify possible evaluation biases related to affiliation, so prejudice regarding organizations or countries' reputation. But I would like to stress that the need to detect and address all types of biases is important in assessment processes. So those biases, they may relate to gender, you mentioned it quite quickly, ethnicity, disciplines, seniority, disability. So we hope that the pilot will be able to detect and assess all kinds of biases that may or may not exist. It must also be noted that blind evaluations do not prevent the existence of the bias in itself, and therefore should be accompanied by other interventions, other measures. For example, setting up processes such as information, trainings for staff and reviewers, etc., to raise awareness about the possibility of bias, sometimes unconscious bias, and detect them. Monitoring exercise to see how the results evolve over the different calls, but also training and support for reviewers to focus only on the substance and content of applications, which is really the most important aspect here. And if in the source of inspiration, at Science Europe, we have developed several tools. So we developed recently a position statement and recommendations on research assessment processes, but also a couple of years ago, a practical guide on improving gender equality in research organizations. You mentioned that it will be a pilot first, and that the pilot will enable you to assess how anonymous evaluation could be performed in the Horizon Europe. I think it's very important that you start with a pilot, and that the outcome of the pilot has to be appraised in a very rigorous manner with control tests in order to compare outcomes of evaluations. This appraisal should enable the Commission, you, to assess if biases are detected. You said that there is no evidence that there is a bias, so this pilot should certainly help you to identify if there are biases. If the quality of the project that is awarded changes depending on the method that you use to evaluate. If blind evaluation is effective to reduce those possible bias or unconscious bias, but also the additional charge that it may create for applicants and also for reviewers. You mentioned the possible of ineligibility. That's something important that should be taken into account. So the possible burden for applicants and reviewers. I think here it's important as well to keep in mind the specificities and the diversity of Horizon Europe instrument and take that into account in the appraisal. You may have different outcomes for projects involving a broad range of partners or large consortia and mono-beneficiaries applicants. So these have to be kept into account in the appraisal of this measure. The second point that you mentioned is interaction with applicants, or the right to react or rebuttal mechanism. I think that the inclusion of a right to react or right to reply is very important, and it's a very positive development. It is actually a recommendation that Science Europe has put in its position statement on research assessment process that I mentioned a bit earlier, and which was released this year. The right to reply can certainly improve the quality, the clarity, and the transparency of assessments. And several of Science Europe member organizations that are research funders or research performing organizations that have implemented such a rebuttal processes all expressed very positive experience with it. So we're certainly supporting the Commission with that proposal. Regarding the specificities of the rebuttal mechanism, I think it's important to avoid delays in the evaluation process and schedule. And therefore, the time that will be given to react is key. You mentioned 5 days, or it was mentioned by the Commission 5 days. Whether it's that or not, I think you have to check the suitability of this duration. You have to carefully consider it and maybe assess it a posteriori, after the first call, see if that 5 days, those 5 days, is it enough? And of course, the right to react must be complemented by the communication of detailed evaluation reports to applicants, and not only for them to see how their contributions were taken into account or the reactions were taken into account, but also for you to appraise or to feed into so that feedback feeds into the appraisal of the effect of the rebuttal on the evaluation outcome. As regard the last points, the portfolio of projects, I would certainly agree with you that it's important to split in 2 phases the evaluation. So starting with an evaluation of the intrinsic quality of each proposal, so focusing solely on the quality of each proposal, and only in a second stage performing type of assessment that are needed to put together portfolios, the identification of complementarity, of gaps, undesired duplications, etc., etc. These have raised actually a lot of questions across research funders and research performing organizations that have developed comparable mission-like or challenge-oriented programs. And several of our member organizations have tried various approaches to support evaluators in this difficult task of putting together a portfolio and a coherent portfolio. So, for example, I can mention breaking down a larger goal or large program in several sub-goals or several sub-packages, and then ensure that projects are selected in each essential package, or launching a first broad call and then subsequent more targeted calls to fill identified gaps in the first portfolio, or involving non-research innovation experts, such as representatives from end users, for example, in order to provide input on the projects and maybe recommend links or combinations of projects to ensure the highest impact. In that selection phase and selection process, here again, transparency will be crucial. So whatever methods is decided, detailed feedback must be communicated to applicants, first of all, for them to understand the reason why their project was accepted or rejected within the portfolio, but also to be transparent about the whole society about how the portfolio was the rationale behind that portfolio. Maybe one final little point, because I mentioned several times the need of transparency and of very detailed feedback from evaluators to the applicants. I do believe it's key and extremely important. I also realize that the scarcity of the budget and the money that is available makes this justification sometimes difficult, as sometimes evaluators have to choose between several excellent projects and have to reject some only based on money and not on quality. So realize that it's also an issue, and in case there are decision makers in the room today, there's never enough opportunity to reaffirm the need for a higher budget for Horizon Europe. So thank you very much, Isabel, for this proposal. And I'm looking forward to hear what other participants have to say on this.
Thank you very much indeed, Mathilde. So that was a very full reaction to what you heard from Isabel. And once again, a number of questions are coming through there. Perhaps, Isabel, a number of people are asking about or pointing out that we also did blind evaluation quite a few framework programs ago. So what lessons have we learned and how are we going to do it differently now? Do you want to come in on that one, Isabel?
Yes, indeed, we have experience in blind evaluations. I want to clarify also, because I have seen questions in the chat, that the test will apply only to the first stage of a two-stages goal. So for the second stage, the experts will know, it will not be anonymized, so they will know the identity of the applicant. Well, what's coming back to our experience, yes, indeed, we have done in the past. I think it was in FP6, if I remember well. But at that time, we didn't have help from the IT. So I remember that we have to manually remove any reference to applicants from the text in the proposals. So we want to avoid this bad experience that we had there at that time, and this is the reason we are including this eligibility criteria. So it will be your responsibility not to disclose the identity of the participants in your proposal. Of course, we want to test all legal consequences here. This is one of the things that we want to test in our anonymous evaluation. But indeed, in the past, we ran anonymous evaluation, and we didn't continue because we didn't show any evidence that this anonymous evaluation remove any bias, and that was the reason I mentioned in my intervention that we have no evidences that our current system is biased, unconsciously biased in that sense. I don't know, Alan, if you want to add anything else here. Yeah.
No, I think that's very clear. I mean, a number of people have also asked, are we going to do a comparison of blind, not blind, to see if there is what difference it makes? And we've looked carefully at this, and it would be intellectually nice. Of course, the problem is peer review is, in any case, not an exact science. and you take one group of experts. There's some natural variation in there, so you'd have to have we believe quite a extremely large sample to make any meaningful results, to try to have a statistical comparison between blind and not blind. But we are going to, in a more qualitative way, try to see, for example, we can talk to the experts afterwards and see if they were surprised when we reveal the identity of the applicants after they've completed their first stage evaluation. But as Isabel says, this is very much a pilot, and we're going to sort of see how it rolls out in practice. On the rebuttal, which is, as Isabel said, is one of these ways where we want to open up the evaluation system. I see some quite positive comments there. Mathilde is a bit concerned, however, about maybe the timing of this, how it might delay the process. Isabel, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yes, we have also discussed thoroughly the timing that we will propose to the applicants, and this is exactly one of the things that we want to test in this pilot. We are going to give 5 days for the applicants to react. We will announce when these 5 days will be in the call conditions, so the applicants will know that during this time they have to be vigilant. And but we also have some constraints. We also have limits for the time to grant, so we need to respect the timing for our evaluations. We are now very much stressed with the timing, so we run evaluations really very stressful, because we need to finish our evaluations in time. And we believe that these 5 days is the maximum that we can allow without jeopardizing our time to grant or time to inform. And we will also believe that 5 days will be sufficient for the applicants to react, always that they know in advance when these 5 days will fall. But again, this is something that we want to test. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll pick up one other point I think Mathilde made there, which rightly pointing out, in an environment of low success rates, which frankly will presumably continue into the new program, we know a lot of applicants feel a bit frustrated sometimes in not getting sufficient feedback after an evaluation, particularly when they haven't been funded. So the scheme we've envisaging for the right to react, because it requires the provision of the individual evaluation reports, we feel that in itself will provide a bit more transparency and a bit more information on some of the details, as well as Isabel said, we're going to try to really make sure in general that the feedback is improved across the board, proportionate to the size of proposals. On the portfolio approach, we didn't go into too much depth there, but as you know, because this is one of the new features of Horizon Europe, where in particular in the case perhaps of missions, the EIC Pathfinder, but perhaps other calls where it's going to be important not just to evaluate proposals on their own, but also to see how we put together a coherent portfolio. We've got some, I think you hinted at some initial ideas there, Isabel. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, the first thing is that we are still discussing the portfolio approach. As you know, this is something that will be applied in the missions and in parts of projects funded under the European Innovation Council. And we are very much under discussion how the evaluation process will be done for this portfolio approach. But as I said, we believe that the way to go is to do the evaluation in these 2 steps. So first, evaluating the proposal alone on its own merits, with the same 3 evaluation criteria that we have for the rest of Horizon 2020, and then take into account the portfolio considerations as we publish in the work program. So we will probably, as you said, launch at the beginning of the program more open calls, and then as long as we just fund some proposals, we will know what we need to fund to build the portfolio approach that we want to build. And then for subsequent calls, probably we will include in the work program different considerations to take into account in the second step of the evaluation. So these considerations will be transparently published in the call conditions. This is how we think now that the portfolio approach could be evaluated. But again, this is all still under discussion.
Okay, well, thanks very much indeed. I see a lot of questions came up there, but obviously we can't address them all. But I think we've touched on the main features of these innovations. And as we said, in large part, our system in Horizon Europe is going to be quite similar to what we're doing now. But it's important to get to understand what we have in mind for these innovations. And I really appreciate the comments you made. And I hope maybe the discussion has clarified some of these aspects. But as we said, we're going to be running pilots. And we ourselves will be learning from that, and we'll be further consulting from applicants and experts when these pilots are run during the course of the first part of the program. So I suggest we now move on to the second block of our workshop, which is, if you like, the human element about the experts themselves, because after all, they're at the heart of the system. And the whole point is, as we said at the beginning, is to make sure we're recruiting and engaging and working effectively with the very best experts across Europe. And I'm absolutely delighted to see that Mark Tashley has managed to log in. I was getting very nervous. I was about to try to do an impression, but I couldn't do that, Mark. So what I think I'll do, if you're ready, Mark, I will hand over. Mark Tashley is the director of the Research Executive Agency, so very much right in the center of things when it comes to proposal evaluation at Horizon 2020. And Mark's going to talk about why to be an expert and all the issues that go around that. So Mark, I hand over to you.
I think we cannot hear Mark. Can you?
No, I can't hear Mark. So a little time out there.
Maybe, Alan, in the meantime, I can just answer some of the questions that we have. So, for instance, just to mention again that the anonymous evaluation will only be done in the first stage. So the experts will only evaluate the outline of the proposal. So in the second stage, where the experts evaluate the full proposal, the experts will know the identity of the applicants. I don't know if you want to answer more questions. Or...
well, maybe also, do you want to introduce our poll, our questions?
Yes, of course. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we were just trying to get an idea of the audience out there. How many have you actually been engaged as an expert? And if also, would you consider being one?
Yeah, the next one.
The next one. While we're waiting for while we're waiting to see if we get Mark back, perhaps I'll begin, because I actually know what Mark was going to say. And if you'll forgive me, I'll start making one or two of his points so we have time to get on to the questions and also to hand over to our respondent in a moment. But just on a statistical point of view, and as I said, the Research Executive Agency is very much in the heart of the Horizon 2020 evaluation process. And they actually issue something like 18,000 contracts to experts every year during the program. So it's very much a big part of the machine. And the whole challenge, of course, is to make sure that we reach out and attract the very best experts from across Europe. As you probably know, we have a very large online database where we invite specialists from any discipline, any sector, any country to sign up and make themselves available to become a Horizon 2020 and in the future Horizon Europe Evaluator. We also strongly believe that diversity is not just a matter of political correctness. It actually leads to better evaluations and better results when we come to evaluate proposals. So we take very seriously making sure we have a good mix of different countries, different backgrounds, a good gender balance, and then according to the proposal, making sure we have the right expertise. And one of the big challenges of our program is actually because our big multinational collaborative projects require a mix of different disciplines. We often not only social sciences and the STEM sciences, but across the board. So we need to find the best experts from some of these lesser known disciplines, perhaps, and we need to find ways that they can work together. I see you come back, Mark. Can you try and speak? No, I'm afraid we still don't hear you. Well, if you forgive me, I'm sort of I'm stealing a wind here by saying the main points that you were going to make, and perhaps you can come in with a chat and add to that. But I was just saying the number of contracts which the Research Executive Agency deals with in a year, and how we need to recruit a diverse range of experts, and we want to make steps to make sure that we reach out as far as possible to recruit and continue to recruit the best experts, and how we take diversity seriously. Why should you be an expert? Mark?
Alan, do you hear me now?
I now hear you, Mark. Yes, yes.
Ah, great.
Good. Okay, so look,
I don't know what I did, but
but I was about to come to the reasons why be an evaluator, which I think you might be saying. So if you want to pick up from there, back in business.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thanks, Alan, for stepping in. And of course, I agree with the messages you have been passing on so far. But let me indeed continue on the track you started. And indeed, I think it's useful to share with you why it would be and could be interesting to become an evaluator. And I would say, for me, the first reason is because you can make a difference. As an evaluator, your role is to assist in the evaluation of research and innovation project proposals. And in this capacity, you have therefore an opportunity to influence where the funding goes, and you can contribute towards Europe's sustainable and inclusive recovery. The EU slogan over the past few months has been "Stronger Together." And honestly, I can't think of an area where this is more relevant than research and innovation. As a second reason for becoming an evaluator, I would quote the opportunity to increase your knowledge. Evaluating the proposals of others offers a valuable experience for potential applicants. You will get a unique insight into the state of the art in your field of expertise. And since you're likely to be part of a multidisciplinary team, you will have opportunities to meet other colleagues and to get exposed to other ideas, new areas, and new influences. As a third reason, I would quote the opportunity you will have to expand your professional network. And this could lead to future collaborations. From experience, I can tell that many good partnerships actually started at our evaluation premises. Allow me to remind you two important elements. If you work as an evaluator, you will receive support and guidance. The expert management and support team of REA provides an excellent service to experts, assisting them with the administrative procedures throughout the whole process. It starts with getting your contract signed up to the point to get paid for your expenses and your honorarium of 450 euros per day. I'm rather proud to say that in a recent poll we have done among experts, not less than 99% of the respondents have indicated that they would love to work with REA again in the future. So my advice is go to the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal, look for the section on experts, and register your CV into our database. There are already 230,000 experts registered there. And if you're already registered, don't forget to update your profile rather regularly, because it's through that database that we will be able to recruit you. So at the Commission and at REA, we always look for new faces, new ideas, and new expertise to help us supporting Europe's R&I sector. So therefore, we're looking forward working with you, and I would like to thank you for your attention.
Mark, many thanks for that. And I say hello to Jean-Eric, who's just joined us. We'll go straight on now to Heidi Paju, who is a senior chief expert at the Estonian Ministry for Research and Education. Heidi, perhaps you'd like to react to what you've heard from Mark, but from a perspective of a smaller member state, and also I think you've been an evaluator yourself. With apologies if you could keep it as brief as you can. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I hope I'm heard. And good evening from my part as well. As Alan said, I work now at the Ministry of Education Research in Estonia, and I've been expert evaluator for several years before starting my job at the ministry. I've evaluated several Marie Skłodowska-Curie projects, as well as some widening projects like widespread and teaming. And I would like to take this opportunity to address two issues that Mark pointed out. The first is actually I think it's also the most important aspect when it comes to the role of evaluator. This is the aspect that we as evaluators can influence where the European support goes and where it's channeled. And it means also that without support, the research can be just hanging on the shelf. And by giving the funding to one or another project, be it individual grant or the research group, we accelerate the development of this discipline. And in my opinion, the latter gives us the power and also the responsibility of supporting the great ideas in our own field. And of course, it is clear that the only one expert cannot say where the support goes or which research projects will be supported. But in the discussion between the other experts, we can really boost the good ideas and the innovation in this one particular field we are experts of. And the second point, which is also very crucial, is actually the professional development of an evaluator, or should I say the professional development of a researcher. While evaluating others' proposals and cooperating with the co-evaluators widens the networks and gives very good insight into the state of play in the discipline. It also demands from evaluator to keep her or himself up to date with the ongoing development and innovation in a broader perspective. For example, the role of evaluator assumes a good knowledge of what is going on in the research policy at the European level, which are the trends at the global scale, and who are the key players in the field. It gives also access, and very valuable access, to the information before the others, and helps to widen the professional network with the future players in the field. And I personally found reading others' proposals very stimulating. It gave me often inspiration on how to approach my own research problems, and sometimes even lead me to the new theories. And as a conclusion, I would like to stress that if we want that the support for the research is not given on the random basis, nor based on the connections, we as researchers need to contribute our time and competencies into evaluating others and give advice to them how to move further with their research. And I would like to wind up by encouraging the research communities to get engaged in the evaluation process, because although being an extra work, the process itself is very enriching. Thank you.
Heidi, many thanks for that. So again, it's attracted quite a few comments, and I think there's quite a few participants agreeing with the value of being a research evaluator and the benefits. Maybe just I'll pass on straight away two comments made to Mark. One was purely factual. Maybe you don't have the statistics to hand, but the question was, do we attract many experts from outside Europe and outside the European research area? I mean, I don't think we need the exact numbers, but just to what extent are we worldwide? And then just combining a few questions was, how do we ensure that when we have a diverse set of experts from different countries, different backgrounds, different sectors, different disciplines, perhaps with cultural backgrounds, how do we ensure they work together and come to a common view on particular proposals? Mark, do you want to just try and tackle those?
Yeah, I will give it a try, Alan. Thanks. Well, indeed, I don't have the figure in the top of my head about how many experts we get from outside Europe, but we do get quite some, because the basis is that we are looking for experts who have the necessary expertise for the proposals to be evaluated. And sometimes, indeed, that expertise can be found outside Europe, and we are contacting experts over there. For quite a long period, we used to bring all the experts into Brussels. And of course, that was a little bit of a handicap if you start fishing experts from all around the globe. But now, more and more, we are using remote evaluation platforms where we can much more easily link up with experts all around the world. And that is, I think, a great feature that allows us indeed to find experts all around, and to really get the experts with the right expertise on board. The second question was, do you remind me, Alan?
Well, it was really how we ensure that when we're dealing with experts from different backgrounds, different countries, different sectors, how do we make sure they work together and have a sort of common view on the proposals they're looking at, or a common approach?
Yeah, well, I think a lot has to do to set the standards very clearly. So we have evaluation standards. We have a well spelled out scoring system that we would like the experts to use. And we are offering training, especially to new incoming experts, where we learn the do's and the don'ts, how to write transparent comments in the evaluation report. And these trainings are online, and they end with a small quiz test so that the expert can test themselves in how far they have understood the methodology. Secondly, experts evaluate first proposals on their own, but then we bring them together in a consensus discussion where they have to confront their ideas, their assessments with those of two or more other experts, and that is under the control of a moderator for the consensus discussion. And there we try to ensure indeed that they converge towards a common vision.
Okay, many thanks, Mark. So there's some very good questions come up again. Unfortunately, we can't deal with all of them. I'm just looking at the results of the poll. Maybe you've seen them, that actually only 20% or 21% of the audience has been an evaluator for the EU. So already I think we're reaching out to a rich audience here of potential new recruits, Mark. And 70% of them would consider being an evaluator in the future. Right, so as I say, some great questions, and perhaps we can have some interaction offline as after this workshop. But delighted to welcome Jean-Eric Paquet here. Jean-Eric, we've had I think quite a wide-ranging discussion. We've looked at the novelties that we're going to try and introduce or pilot in the new program: the blind evaluation, the right to react, dealing with portfolios. In other words, trying to find ways to improve our process for the new program.
Yeah.
And you've just heard some discussion about the human side, the experts themselves. So, I mean, Jean-Eric, perhaps, I mean, we've also recognized that success rates have been low and will continue to be rather low. So what for you would be the main features of a fair and transparent evaluation program in the future? Or what are you hoping to see?
Alan, thank you very much. Thanks also to the participants to the panel and the discussion which is ongoing. I mean, Heidi, thank you very much for your comment at the end as well, because I think that the pool of expert evaluators across the European Union is an untapped resource also for member states to develop their own research and innovation system, and the quality and the excellence base of those research and innovation systems. Yes, I mean, Alan, the work which is being done now in the team of the Common Implementation Center, together with Marc and other agency directors, is exactly what we need. We have, under Horizon 2020, I think, a robust system. In fact, we probably have the best system in the world by far under the European Research Council, with expert evaluators chosen by the Scientific Council. This is unmatched, as far as at least I am aware, and allows really to produce disruptive, groundbreaking science. This is spectacular. We learned a lot from it. The European Innovation Council now is also trying to break new ground on evaluations, and is having this interview phase inspired in part by the European Research Council, which also I think is of course resource intensive, time consuming, expensive, but producing also, I find, rather remarkable results. Also because we have noted, as I'm sure you all know, sometimes striking differences between rankings after the written evaluation and then after the interview, where you sometimes have companies which have had their application prepared by technical support and don't know their project, and frankly this doesn't go down very well in a panel. And conversely, then teams which are amazingly energetic and smart and which can compensate a written proposal which was not quite as well presented. So that's all interesting, I think, background. And then in the middle of it, the bulk of expert evaluations of Horizon Europe, run in terms of support by Marc Teschlis agency, is, I think, also very, very robust. At the same time, we are, and I think the main reason for that is the deep frustration across Europe of our success rates. We have still a perception that the expert evaluation is not always fully transparent, that we sometimes have reputation biases, and that it is very difficult to get a group of experts to change their mind. And the rebuttal system itself under Article 22, of course, comes very late in the process. So that was discussed also politically, as I think you all know, during the negotiation of Horizon Europe. And we are now putting forward, as you've discussed, this right to answer, but also this pilot on blind evaluation. So the right to answer, we will introduce it. We will probably in the first few calls adjust it as we move forward, but that I think will have quite some impact. Maybe expert can tell us whether they think it will have an impact on them as well, but I think this will really promote the quality of the output of the experts, because there will then be this possibility for projects to come back to you and challenge you occasionally on how you have looked at their projects, and possibly in some cases ensure that we adjust also, or you adjust your own views. So that is going to be introduced, and I find this is a really key step. I'm very much aware that this is a challenging step, but I think one which is really important. On the blind evaluation, I've looked a little bit at the chat function as I arrived, Alan, a moment ago, and the questions and answers. And what I'm reading there is what I'm hearing from my teams. Some tell me this was done at the time, it worked very well. I saw that early on, fourth framework program. This is when I started in the European Commission. And then others which said, well, sixth framework program, frankly, we did it, but honestly, we knew who was presenting. And when we didn't, we were trying and managed to find out. So I'm sure that the reality is a complex one, but this bias in reputation is a real political challenge, the perception of it. nobody can judge whether it's a reality. I think there is no data for that. That's not the point. And I personally don't believe that the bias is a real one. But the perception is problematic enough. And from that point of view, I have high hopes that the pilot will help us either to have more blind evaluations afterwards, or possibly to adjust our system to ensure that we can, to an extent, correct the bias. So experts, you are really at the heart of it. It's your work which makes a difference in getting the best science and the most impactful projects out there. So thank you very much for that. And project proposers, I know that the frustration is not the evaluation system, but the success rate. On that, I'm afraid that the budget is what it is. We will try to manage it with you smartly, but please continue to present your great ideas, and we will continue to be finding the best of them and fund them. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much, Jean-Eric, indeed. So, well, I think that those messages more or less wrap up our discussion. And again, I do apologize for possible frustration because there's so many good questions come through. What I really would like to do now is to just try and summarize the main messages which I think we've looked at today, because we're going to write up a little report on this. I mean, so first of all, we looked at the innovations, and now we've had a lot of discussion about the blind evaluation pilot, the anonymous evaluation. And as we said, this is, as a lot of you said, and as Jean-Eric has picked up, we did this before many years ago. And one of my first jobs indeed was with a bottle of Tipex, which doesn't even exist now, trying to cover up the logos or names of companies when they forgot to make their proposal anonymous. So we're not in those days anymore. We're going to be talking about very short first stage proposals. But we'll have to see. It's a pilot. We'll see how it works, and we'll talk to everyone who takes part. The right to react, that seemed, at least in the chat, to get some rather positive feedback, and that's what we heard during our earlier consultations. But again, we have to fine tune and see how that works in practice, look at the practical side of things. And we also touched on how we're going to evaluate and put together coherent portfolios. On the human side, bringing together the best experts, as Mark says, I mean, there's in the Research Executive Agency, there's a well-oiled system, I would say, for attracting and bringing experts, but there's a concern we need always to get in new blood. And as I said, the poll of this workshop today was quite interesting, but not many of you have actually been evaluator experts. So if nothing else, perhaps you might consider signing up and making yourselves available for the future program. We didn't, well, as we had just in the discussion there, Heidi and Jean-Eric picked up on it. This database is, in a sense, an untapped resource. Actually, we do make this database available to member states, but the take-up isn't always as much as we might expect. But it's, as part of the European research area, this is indeed a common pool, a common resource that perhaps member states could be using more than they are. I'm just looking now in the chat, so we haven't got time to respond to them, but just to acknowledge the points were made about the problems of interdisciplinary evaluation, integrating social science and humanity experts in evaluating proposals. Another point was made, which I think we recognise, was the issue of when we're evaluating remotely now, which we were doing even before COVID, there was more remote evaluation. The opportunities for networking, perhaps, which is one of the benefits Mark alluded to, perhaps not as clear as before, but I think there's still very much ways which now we're all used to working online like this. I think those interactions can almost be as rich as they were before, even if you're not going to the pub with the expert in the evening. Look, we're almost reaching our time, so unless I'm looking at looking at the speakers, unless anyone wants to really come in at the last minute. Okay, well, they're shaking heads. Well, it's been a very long day, but many thanks from me as well to the speakers, the respondents, and to Jean-Eric, and indeed to the audience for filling this chat and raising some important questions. As I said at the beginning, this is very much part of making sure we're designing the best program as we go forward, into the first calls. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have had this discussion with you all today. So with that, I will close the session. Have a great evening, and look forward to carrying on the R&I days tomorrow. Good evening.